Close your eyes for a moment and picture this. You're standing deep within a stone chamber built thousands of years before the pyramids, surrounded by walls that seem to breathe with sound. Every footstep echoes, every whisper multiplies, and the air itself feels alive with vibration. This isn't just an ancient ruin, it's a carefully engineered acoustic masterpiece designed to transform ordinary ceremonies into extraordinary emotional experiences. What if I told you that our prehistoric ancestors weren't just stacking stones for shelter, but were actually creating sophisticated sound chambers that could manipulate human consciousness? Today, we're embarking on an incredible journey to uncover one of history's most fascinating mysteries: how ancient cultures used acoustic engineering to control emotion and ceremony. These weren't random constructions, they were deliberate architectural marvels where sound became a tool for spiritual connection. Imagine being part of a ritual in Neolithic times, surrounded by chanting that seems to come from the walls themselves, feeling the vibrations resonate through your very bones. The builders of these spaces understood something profound about human psychology: that sound can bypass rational thought and speak directly to our emotions. They created environments where a single voice could sound like a chorus, where whispers could carry like shouts, and where rhythmic patterns could induce trance-like states. This was acoustic engineering at its most sophisticated, crafted millennia before we had the scientific language to describe resonance frequencies or standing waves. What we're about to explore goes far beyond simple archaeology. It's a revelation about human nature itself. These ancient temples show us that our need to create emotional, transformative experiences is woven into our very DNA. From the haunting Hypogeum of Malta to the stone circles of Britain, these spaces tell a story of human ingenuity that connected communities, shaped belief systems, and created powerful shared experiences. As we journey together through these echoing chambers of the past, we'll discover not just how they built these acoustic wonders, but why they mattered, and what they can teach us about our own relationship with sound, space, and spirituality. Get ready to have your perception of ancient history completely transformed. To truly grasp the magnitude of this prehistoric achievement, we must travel to the islands of Malta and descend into the depths of the Hal-Saflioni Hypogeum. This labyrinthine underground temple complex, carved from solid limestone around 6,000 years ago, stands as one of humanity's oldest and most profound acoustic experiments. It's here, in the absolute darkness of these windowless chambers, that sound wasn't just an accessory to ritual, it was the very medium of the experience. Modern acoustic analysis has revealed something astonishing. The Hypogeum isn't just old, it's precisely engineered. The central chamber, known as the oracle room, resonates powerfully at a frequency of 110 Hz. This isn't a random acoustic phenomenon. When voices chant or drums beat at this specific frequency, the entire room seems to awaken, the sound waves aligning to create a sustained, bone-rattling hum that can be felt in the chest as much as it's heard by the ears. This choice of frequency appears to be incredibly deliberate. Contemporary research into the human brain suggests that exposure to sound waves around 110 Hz can correlate with shifts in cognitive processing, potentially quieting the language centers of the brain and promoting a more emotional, intuitive state of awareness. In essence, the architecture itself was designed to guide the mind toward a transcendental, trance-like condition. The builders achieved this through breathtakingly sophisticated methods. They sculpted the walls and ceilings into curved, reflective surfaces that channel sound in specific ways. They carved small, niche-like cavities, often referred to as speaking tubes or resonating ducts, which act as primitive but highly effective Helmholtz resonators, amplifying certain tones and filtering out others. This created what archaeologist Simon Stoddart so aptly called an auditory theater, a space where the very walls participated in the ceremony. Imagine a shaman or priest standing in the oracle room, their voice amplified and transformed by the architecture, seeming to emanate from the stone itself. For a community with no concept of speakers or microphones, this would have been an undeniable experience of the divine. The voice wasn't merely human anymore. It was a voice of the earth, a voice of the ancestors, a supernatural phenomenon made audibly real. This visceral, physical sensation of sound, feeling the vibration course through your body in the pitch black, would have been overwhelmingly persuasive, solidifying religious beliefs and social hierarchies in a way that simple words alone never could. This early innovation reveals a profound priority. Ancient cultures understood that to control the emotional experience of a ceremony, you had to control the sonic environment. This foundational principle, discovered in the darkness of Maltese tombs, would echo through millennia, influencing the design of sacred spaces across the globe and setting the stage for the entire evolution of ritual practice. The principle of resonance sits at the very heart of this ancient acoustic artistry. Think of resonance not as a complex scientific term, but as a simple, powerful phenomenon we all experience. The way a certain note can make a wine glass vibrate, or how a singer's voice can shatter crystal. Our prehistoric ancestors learned to harness this force by designing their sacred spaces to amplify very specific sound frequencies, turning entire chambers into massive musical instruments. The most startling discovery across multiple sites is the recurring focus on a low frequency around 110 Hz. Modern studies, including work by neuroscientists, suggest that exposure to this specific frequency can produce a fascinating shift in brain activity. It appears to quiet the prefrontal cortex, the region associated with higher reasoning and language, while simultaneously stimulating areas linked to emotion, mood, and empathy. This isn't just a sound you hear, it's a sound that physically alters your state of mind, guiding participants toward a more suggestible, meditative, or even dream-like consciousness. This effect was achieved through breathtakingly intentional architecture. Builders weren't just piling rocks, they were sculpting sound. They shaped walls with precise curvatures and angles to catch sound waves and reflect them back into the room, reinforcing the desired frequencies. They carved niches and ducts that functioned as primitive Helmholtz resonators, essentially, acoustic filters that trap and amplify a specific tone, much like blowing across the top of a bottle produces a distinct note. The work of acoustic engineer David Lubman shows us how even the subtlest curve in a dome or wall can act like a parabolic mirror for sound, focusing energy to a single spot and creating pockets of incredible intensity. In a ceremony, this meant the leader's voice didn't just travel, it was transformed. A chant would swell into a chorus, a drumbeat would evolve into a pervasive, chest-rattling rhythm that everyone in the room could feel vibrating through their bodies. This physical sensation of sound was the key to controlling the emotional atmosphere. When you feel a deep hum in your bones, it bypasses your analytical mind and speaks directly to your primal instincts. In a dimly lit temple, this could be used to generate collective awe, unifying the group's emotional state into a single, powerful experience of wonder or even fear. It was the ultimate tool for social cohesion, making abstract spiritual concepts feel tangibly, undeniably real. The question of how these builders discovered such precise acoustic properties without any formal understanding of physics remains one of the great mysteries. The answer likely lies in millennia of careful observation and experimentation. They would have noticed how sound behaved differently in various natural caves, and through trial and error with different materials and shapes, they refined their techniques. Their intuitive, hands-on mastery of sound waves stands as a monumental achievement, proving that the drive to engineer human emotion through technology is a truly ancient and profoundly human ambition. Moving from the targeted power of resonance, we encounter a second acoustic principle equally vital to these ancient rituals: the deliberate manipulation of echo and reverberation. While resonance tuned the mind, these lingering sounds were masterfully employed to transform the very atmosphere of a space, crafting an palpable aura of the eternal and the supernatural. The passage tomb of Newgrange in Ireland, older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids, offers a breathtaking example of this acoustic engineering. Its long, narrow entrance passage, lined with massive, closely fitted stones, acts as a perfect waveguide for sound. A simple chant or handclap at its entrance doesn't just echo. It unfolds into a complex, cascading tapestry of sound that seems to hang in the air for seconds longer than nature would ordinarily allow. This elongation of sound creates a profound sensory illusion. It makes the momentary feel permanent, the human seem eternal, and the earthly ceremony sound as if it's being joined by an unseen, timeless chorus. This effect was far from an architectural accident. By carefully calculating the dimensions and surface textures of their chambers, these early engineers could precisely control the persistence of sound, known as the reverberation time. A longer reverberation has a powerful, disorienting effect on human perception. When a voice continues to bounce around a room for several seconds after the speaker has stopped, it breaks down our normal understanding of cause and effect. The sound appears to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, detached from its original source. In a ceremonial context, this would have been interpreted as the voices of spirits, gods, or ancestors literally speaking through the walls, physically validating the beliefs central to the ritual. This acoustic trick dissolved the individual's sense of isolation, merging their experience with the group's and creating a powerful, unified emotional state where the boundary between the living and the divine became blurry and thin. The psychological impact of this cannot be overstated. This manipulated soundscape actively broke down individual critical thought and fostered a powerful sense of suggestibility and collective awe. In such an environment, the words of a spiritual leader would be imbued with supernatural weight, their authority dramatically reinforced as their voice took on these magical, unearthly qualities. This wasn't merely about amplification, it was about transformation. In some sites, the specific patterns of echo were designed to mimic powerful natural phenomena. A rhythmic chant might return as a sound resembling a stampede, or a single clap could ripple through the chamber like a clap of thunder, effectively linking the ceremony to the immense, uncontrollable forces of nature and cosmology. This fusion of human ritual and elemental power through sound would have massively amplified the emotional gravity of the event, making every participant feel they were part of something far larger than themselves. The lasting impression left by such a multi-sensory experience ensured that the messages and social structures reinforced there were not easily forgotten, echoing in the memory long after the ceremony had ended. Across the Mediterranean and centuries later, we find this ancient knowledge of acoustic engineering refined to an astonishing degree in the oracle chambers of classical Greece. While the Neolithic builders of Malta worked with intuition and observation, the Greek priests systematized this power, creating what might be considered the first dedicated sound studios for spiritual manipulation. Sites like the renowned oracle at Delphi were not chosen by chance. They were selected for their unique geological and acoustic properties. Ancient historians like Plutarch, who himself served as a priest at Delphi, left us detailed accounts of a central fissure or cleft in the earth within the temple's inner sanctum, the Aditon. From this opening, sweet-smelling vapors or natural gases like ethylene would seep out, gases that modern toxicology confirms can induce a mild, trance-like state of euphoria and confusion. This was the first layer of sensory alteration, but the true genius lay in the integration of sound. Archaeoacoustic studies have revealed that beneath this chamber ran a complex network of underground fissures and, in some cases, purpose-built resonating tubes or channels. A priestess, the Pythia, would inhale these gases and sit above this opening. When she spoke, her voice, often chanting or uttering fragmented phrases, would enter these subterranean conduits. The stone channels were acoustically tuned, much like the organ pipes of a cathedral, to amplify specific low frequencies while filtering out higher ones. The result was a deep, booming, and massively distorted vocalization that would then emanate from the earth itself, echoing around the small, hard-surfaced chamber. A simple phrase would be transformed into an ominous, rumbling pronouncement that seemed to have no single human source. For a supplicant waiting in an antechamber, the experience was meticulously staged. They would not see the Pythia, they would only hear this dislocated, echoing voice, a voice that seemed both everywhere and nowhere. The pronouncements were famously vague and open to interpretation, a practice known as amphibology. A query about going to war might be met with a rumbling echo that could be interpreted as "you will go and return not," or "you will not go and return." The petitioner's own hopes, fears, and biases did the final work of interpretation, making them an active participant in convincing themselves of the oracle's truth. This wasn't a crude deception but a sophisticated psychological tool. In a world filled with uncertainty, famine, war, plague, the oracle provided a much-needed anchor of divine certainty. It transformed paralyzing ambiguity into actionable, God-sanctioned direction, offering comfort and resolve to leaders and common folk alike. The influence of this acoustic theatrical practice on later religious institutions is profound and undeniable. The architects of great Gothic cathedrals, those separated by millennia and geography, employed the very same principles. They designed vast, reverberant spaces where the chanting of monks and the pealing of organs would create a palpable, heaven-like atmosphere, a sound so immersive it felt divine. The goal was identical: to use engineered sound to elevate the human spirit, to inspire awe, and to legitimize spiritual authority. The oracle chambers teach us that the architecture of faith is often literally architectural. Sound is a primary medium for shaping belief because it operates on a visceral, emotional level that reasoned argument cannot easily reach. It commands not just attention but feeling. These practices were less about maintaining power through fear and more about guiding a community through the profound psychological tool of shared or inspiring experience. The stability of a culture, they understood, depended as much on emotional consensus as it did on laws or armies, and sound was their most powerful technology for forging that unity. Beyond the manipulation of resonance and echo, ancient builders mastered a third, incredibly sophisticated principle: the art of directional sound focusing. This technique transformed architecture into a kind of acoustic spotlight, capable of beaming sound to precise locations or isolating it for a privileged few. At temples like Hypogeum in Malta, we find beautifully curved walls and carefully aligned stone apertures that function like primitive parabolic dishes. Modern acoustic testing in these spaces reveals a startling phenomenon: a voice speaking from a specific point, often a central altar or a designated niche, is projected outward with remarkable clarity and volume, as if the building itself is lending its power to the speaker. Conversely, sound generated from the outer edges of the chamber is absorbed and muffled, lost in the general murmur of the space. This wasn't a subtle effect. It was a dramatic and undeniable audio filter built directly into the stone. This engineered hierarchy of hearing had a profound social purpose. It created a clear auditory division between the ritual leader and the participants. The shaman or priest standing in the acoustic sweet spot would have their words amplified and clarified, their voice cutting through the ceremonial din with an unnatural, almost supernatural precision. For the gathered community, this would powerfully reinforce the leader's unique status. Their words weren't just important, they were technically and architecturally privileged, making their connection to the divine feel audibly real and exclusive. This control over information flow was a masterstroke of social engineering. The leader could receive a whispered question from an aide that no one else could hear, and then deliver a booming, godlike answer, creating the illusion of direct communication with unseen forces. Or they could issue a command that was crystal clear to everyone, ensuring their directives were understood and followed without the confusion of a noisy crowd. The construction required to achieve this effect speaks to a deep, patient understanding of sound wave behavior. Acoustic simulations show that these directional properties are not the result of a single curved wall, but of the precise, intentional alignment of multiple stone surfaces working in concert. The builders would have had to experiment endlessly, adjusting angles by minuscule degrees, testing different rock densities, and meticulously shaping each slab to reflect and channel sound along a desired path. This process represents an immense investment of time and collective knowledge, passed down through generations. It underscores just how critical this sonic control was deemed to be for the functioning of their society. In a world without writing, where oral tradition and live oration were the primary means of preserving culture and maintaining order, the ability to command auditory attention was tantamount to holding the microphone of reality itself. Ultimately, this principle shows us how sound could be sanctified or even subtly weaponized to shape community dynamics. It fostered social cohesion by creating a shared, awe-inspiring experience that centered on a unifying figure and a common belief system. Everyone felt they were part of something larger, but the architecture ensured they all had their designated place within that hierarchy. This auditory control prevented the chaos of competing voices during critical rituals, ensuring ceremonies proceeded with order and profound emotional impact. It provided a stable, predictable structure for navigating the uncertainties of life, from seasonal changes to conflicts with neighboring groups. By architecturally endorsing the leader's voice, these temples didn't just amplify sound. They amplified authority, trust, and collective identity, using the physics of sound waves to build the very foundation of social order. While the architectural forms were masterful, they would have been acoustically inert without the ancient builders' deep, intuitive understanding of the materials themselves. The very stone they chose was not merely a structural element. It was an active acoustic component, carefully selected to shape the emotional texture of the sound within these sacred spaces. This material science reveals a level of intentionality that moves far beyond simple construction. In the sprawling alignments of Carnac, France, we see a powerful example of this principle in action. The massive standing stones, or menhirs, are primarily local granite, an extremely hard, dense, and highly reflective stone. When struck or chanted near, these stones do not absorb sound. They bounce it back with incredible clarity and force. This creates a lively, reverberant soundscape of sharp echoes and overlapping reflections. a sonic environment perfectly suited for large, communal gatherings where a sense of grandeur, power, and collective energy was the desired goal. Conversely, in more intimate burial chambers or oracle rooms, builders often sought out softer, more porous limestone or sandstone. These materials act as natural acoustic absorbers, deadening excess reverberation and creating a much drier, more intimate sonic atmosphere. In such a space, whispers wouldn't travel far and would remain private, while a central voice could be heard with startling clarity without competing with its own echoes. This allowed for focused, personal revelation or confidential communication between a priest and a supplicant, crafting an experience of secrecy and privileged access. The choice between a reflective granite and an absorptive limestone was never arbitrary. It was a direct response to the intended emotional and social function of the ritual. They were, in essence, tuning the room's emotional frequency by selecting its very skin. This mastery extended to the mineral composition of the rocks. Builders across different cultures displayed a marked preference for stones rich in crystalline structures, particularly quartz. Quartz is piezoelectric, meaning it generates a small electrical charge when subjected to pressure or vibration. While the charge itself might be minimal, the cultural and sensory impact was likely profound. A space lined with quartz-rich stones would have seemed literally alive, responsive to touch, to chanting, to the rhythm of drums. The stones might subtly vibrate underfoot, and they would have been exceptional at amplifying higher frequencies, making the ring of a metal chime or the clear tone of a voice sound brilliantly sharp and almost ethereal. In contrast, dense, homogeneous stones like basalt were chosen for their ability to amplify low, fundamental frequencies, producing the kind of deep, rumbling bass that could be felt in the chest and simulated the powerful, unsettling tremors of the earth itself, linking the ceremony directly to primal forces. The lengths to which these cultures went to acquire the perfect material are a stunning testament to the importance they placed on acoustic design. There is compelling evidence that specific types of rock were transported over astonishing distances, a logistical feat that required immense communal effort. This wasn't done merely for aesthetic appeal or perceived durability. It was done because a particular sandstone from a quarry 50 miles away had the exact right density and porosity to achieve the desired reverberation time for a specific chamber. This represents a sophisticated, orally transmitted tradition of material acoustics. Knowledge of which rocks sang and which rocks slept was passed down through generations of craftspeople, forming an empirical science that predated the formal laws of physics by thousands of years. They learned through observation and repetition how a stone's density, internal fissuring, and surface texture would shape sound, curating a palette of materials as deliberately as a modern acoustic engineer selects wall panels and diffusers. This ancient mindfulness offers a powerful lesson for our modern world, which often treats acoustics as an afterthought to be solved with hidden panels and digital processors. These prehistoric builders thought holistically. The environment, the material, and the human experience were inseparable parts of a single design. They understood that the feeling of a space is created by a symphony of sensory inputs, and sound is perhaps the most emotionally direct of them all. Their work challenges contemporary architects to consider the innate acoustic properties of their primary materials from the very first sketch, to see a wall not just as a barrier but as a resonant membrane, and to remember that the most profound technological solutions are sometimes found not in adding complexity, but in deeply understanding the simple, natural world already at our fingertips. Beyond the powerful amplification and projection of sound, ancient acoustic engineers demonstrated an equally sophisticated understanding of its opposite, the strategic use of silence and isolation. This fourth principle, sound masking and isolation, involved designing chambers that acted as spiritual echoic chambers, creating a pristine auditory canvas upon which the rituals could be painted without distraction. In the profound depths of the Hal-Saflioni Hypogeum, this concept reaches its apex. Descending through its multiple levels is a journey away from the world of wind, weather, and wildlife. The complex is a labyrinth with corridors that twist and turn, not just as an architectural flourish, but as a brilliant acoustic baffle. These winding passages effectively trap and dissipate any sound trying to enter from the outside world, while the sheer mass of the rock, meters of solid limestone, acts as a perfect natural sound barrier. The result is an almost total sensory vacuum. Modern acoustic surveys in such underground spaces have measured a reduction in ambient noise by up to 30 decibels. To put that in perspective, it's the difference between a quiet rural night and the inside of a recording studio. In this engineered silence, the slightest sound becomes a monumental event. The scuff of a sandal on stone, the rustle of a linen robe, or the intake of a breath becomes part of the soundscape. This intense quiet primes the nervous system for hypersensitivity. Then, when the ceremony begins, a single drum strike, a low chant, the sound doesn't just enter the ears, it seems to flood the entire consciousness. There is no competition. The sound is everything. This forced, hyper-focused attention is a powerful psychological trigger, making participants extraordinarily receptive and suggestible, their awareness narrowed entirely to the ritual unfolding before them. This sensory deprivation was not a byproduct but the entire point. By stripping away all mundane auditory references, the architects were effectively building a separate reality. In this cocoon of stone and silence, the normal rules of time and space seemed to dissolve. A ceremony that might have lasted an hour could feel like an eternity, or a moment outside of time altogether. This altered state of perception was crucial for making the experience feel truly divine and otherworldly. The drumming and chanting within this isolated space weren't just heard. They were felt as visceral, physical vibrations that traveled through the floor and into the bones of the participants, creating a direct, somatic connection to the ritual that bypassed intellectual skepticism and spoke directly to primal emotion. The value placed on this isolation reveals a deep, ancient understanding of human psychology. In a world filled with the constant, unpredictable sounds of nature and community, the ability to create a perfectly controlled sonic environment was the ultimate luxury and a profound tool. It allowed for an unparalleled intensity of shared experience. A group of people undergoing this together would have their individual emotional states synchronize, creating a powerful collective effervescence, a sense of unity and shared purpose that was the glue of early societies. The ceremony became a secret, a shared journey into a hidden world that only they had accessed, forever binding them to each other and to the beliefs being enacted. This ancient pursuit of silence shows us that the power of sound is not just in its presence, but in its deliberate and masterful absence. Now, let's journey across the Atlantic to the jungles of Mesoamerica, where we find a stunningly different application of these same acoustic principles, not in a dark, silent tomb, but in the bright, bustling heart of a Mayan city, the ball court. Here, the goal wasn't to induce a trance through resonant chanting, but to stage a dramatic, high-stakes spectacle where the central sound effect was the thunderous impact of a heavy rubber ball. The parallel, sloping walls of these grand arenas, sometimes stretching over 100 feet long, were masterfully engineered to act as a massive acoustic waveguide. This architectural form channels sound waves along a specific path, preventing them from dissipating quickly into the open air. The result was that every strike of the ball, a sound already sharp and percussive from the solid rubber, was captured, amplified, and focused directly toward the spectators and players. A single bounce wouldn't just be heard, it would echo and roll down the length of the court like a peal of thunder, a sound so powerful and unnatural it could only be divine. This wasn't an accidental byproduct of the design, it was the very point. In Mayan cosmology, the ball game was far more than a sport. It was a ritual reenactment of their creation myth, a literal battle between the heroes of the underworld and the gods of the heavens. The outcome was believed to have direct, real-world consequences, influencing the seasons, the success of the harvest, or the very movement of the sun. Within this sacred context, the acoustics were a crucial narrative device. The booming echo transformed the physical game into a cosmic one. It was interpreted as the voice of the gods themselves, reacting to the play, deciding fates, and participating in the drama. For the players, this must have been an immense psychological pressure. Every move they made was accompanied by this deafening, god-like commentary. For the audience, the soundscape made the spiritual stakes tangibly, audibly real, merging entertainment with profound religious observance. Anthropologists studying these sites note that the experience was a complete sensory immersion. The visual spectacle of the players in elaborate regalia, the physical intensity of the game, and this overwhelming auditory environment worked in concert to create an unforgettable communal event. The booming acoustics served to legitimize the religious and political authority of the ruling class, who often presided over these games. By staging an event where the gods seemed to be audibly intervening, the leaders reinforced their role as the crucial intermediaries between the human world and the divine. The ball court, therefore, was not just a stadium. It was a powerful tool for social cohesion and political control, using engineered sound to bind the community together under a shared belief system and a shared sense of awe. This brilliant fusion of sport, ritual, and physics forces us to reconsider the very nature of ancient entertainment. It reveals a society that did not draw a hard line between the sacred and the secular. A major sporting event was inherently a spiritual ceremony, and the technology of the day, in this case acoustic engineering, was deployed to heighten that connection to its maximum potential. It makes one wonder about our own modern large-scale events. When we attend a massive concert in a perfectly engineered arena, feeling the bass vibrate through our chest as lasers cut through the haze, or when we sit in a roaring sports stadium where the crowd's roar seems to become a single entity, are we not participating in a similar, albeit secular, version of this ancient practice? We too use advanced acoustics and sensory manipulation to create collective euphoria and a powerful sense of shared identity. The Mayans simply directed that powerful technology toward a different understanding of the universe, one where every bounce of the ball echoed through the cosmos. Beyond the thunderous echoes of the ball court and the profound silence of the oracle chamber lies perhaps the most subtly powerful acoustic principle of all: the architecture of rhythm. This fifth principle moves beyond amplification or isolation to something far more organic: the actual shaping of human behavior through sound. In certain ancient spaces, the very geometry of the stones was designed to coax individual participants into a unified, synchronized whole, using the physics of echo to act as a natural, inescapable metronome. The great stone circles of Northern Europe, like Stonehenge, provide a breathtaking example. While their full acoustic properties are still being mapped, preliminary studies and computer models suggest that their circular, inward-facing arrangement creates a unique sonic environment. Sound generated within the circle doesn't just echo randomly. It reflects back from the massive standing stones, focusing the energy toward the center and creating a series of overlapping, rhythmic returns. Imagine a small group standing within that circle, perhaps chanting or clapping as part of a ceremony. The first clap rings out. A fraction of a second later, a distinct echo returns from the surrounding stones. The next clap instinctively aligns with that returning sound, and the next, without any conscious instruction or a designated leader keeping time. The group's individual rhythms begin to entrain, to lock into a shared, steady pulse dictated by the architecture itself. The random noise of a dozen individuals gradually transforms into the powerful, ordered beat of a single ceremonial body. This isn't just a neat acoustic trick, it's a profound biological and social catalyst. Neuroscientists have shown that this kind of rhythmic synchronization has a direct, measurable effect on the human brain. Coordinated group activities, especially those involving rhythm, trigger the release of endorphins, the body's natural feel-good chemicals. This creates a shared sense of euphoria, reduces stress, and lowers perceptions of pain. The experience becomes not just spiritually uplifting, but physically and biologically rewarding. Participants would leave the ceremony feeling literally high on togetherness, their brains having associated the ritual, the place, and the community with a powerful positive reinforcement. This neurochemical reward system would have been a masterful engine for ensuring the longevity and stability of these cultural practices. People wouldn't just attend rituals out of duty or fear. They would be drawn back by a deep, subconscious craving for that powerful feeling of unity and well-being. The architecture itself was engineered to make this bonding inevitable, turning the ceremony into a potent drug delivered not by a plant, but by physics and human collaboration. This built-in rhythm transformed the ritual from a passive observance into an active, participatory engine of social cohesion. Ethnomusicologists studying modern drum circles observe this exact same phenomenon, even without the ancient architecture. When a group drums together, their brain waves can actually begin to synchronize, fostering powerful feelings of empathy and connection. Now, amplify that natural tendency with a stone circle specifically tuned to enhance and guide that synchronization. The effect would have been magnified exponentially. This principle reveals an ancient, intuitive understanding of a concept we're only now quantifying with science. That synchronized activity is a fundamental glue for human communities. It breaks down barriers of individuality and forges a powerful collective identity. In a world without mass media or easy communication, these rhythmic ceremonies were a primary technology for maintaining social order, ensuring that everyone literally moved to the same beat, sharing not just beliefs but a biological rhythm. This challenges our modern view of these sites as passive backdrops for ritual. They were, in fact, active participants, the unseen conductor of the human orchestra within. The stones didn't just host the ceremony, they shaped it, guided it, and ultimately ensured its emotional and social success. This understanding reframes these monuments not as silent sentinels of a lost faith, but as sophisticated social technology. They were tools for building trust, cooperation, and shared purpose on a massive scale, using the universal language of rhythm to speak directly to our bodies and our brains. The longevity of these sites and the cultures that built them may owe a great debt to this simple, brilliant fact. They learned how to build spaces that felt good to be in together, and in doing so, they built civilizations that could endure. This brings us to a truly groundbreaking revelation that connects the ancient stones directly to our modern understanding of the human brain. For centuries, the profound impact of these temples was attributed to faith or superstition, but we now have hard scientific evidence revealing a clear biological mechanism at work. Advanced neuroimaging technology, like functional MRI scans, allows us to peer inside the living brain as it's exposed to the very frequencies these ancient builders so carefully engineered. The findings are nothing short of astonishing. When a brain is subjected to a sustained tone of 110 Hz, the frequency so common in sites like the Hypogeum, we see a significant shift in brainwave patterns. The fast, busy beta waves associated with our normal waking consciousness, the state of active thinking, problem solving, and critical analysis begin to quiet down. In their place, slower, more rhythmic theta waves emerge. Theta brainwaves are the gateway to the subconscious. They dominate during deep meditation, the hypnagogic state just before sleep, and during periods of intense creativity and intuition. This is a state of open, receptive awareness where the brain's usual filters are relaxed. Neurologist Dr. Ian Cook's research demonstrated this shift powerfully. In his studies, he found that exposure to these low-frequency sounds actually reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, the brain's language processing and critical thinking center. Imagine the effect this would have on a participant in an ancient ceremony. As the chanting began and the chamber resonated at this specific frequency, their capacity for skeptical, analytical thought would literally be dialed down. They would become less inclined to question what they were hearing and more open to accepting symbolic, emotional, and spiritual content. The architecture wasn't just setting a mood, it was physically reconfiguring the brain for a transcendent experience. This neurological shift explains the reports of visions, profound emotional release, and feelings of universal connection that are so often associated with these rituals. With the brain's critical faculties subdued, the emotional centers like the amygdala and the hippocampus, key players in memory and feeling, become more active. This creates a powerful, double-barreled effect. Not only is the individual more emotionally volatile and suggestible in the moment, but the experience is also seared into their memory with incredible vividness, ensuring it will be recalled with high emotional intensity for years to come. The ceremony becomes an unforgettable anchor of belief. This isn't mere speculation, it's a documented biological response. The sound waves travel through the air, vibrate through the bones of the skull, and directly influence the electrical activity of the brain itself, blending external architecture with internal chemistry in a seamless dance. The implications of this are profound, forcing us to completely reevaluate the sophistication of these prehistoric spiritual practices. They were not operating on blind faith alone. They were leveraging a reproducible physiological technology. The shaman or priest presiding over the ceremony was in effect a master neurotechnologist, guiding the entire community through a controlled, shared alteration of consciousness. This gave their words and symbols an unparalleled power to shape worldviews, reinforce social norms, and provide comfort in the face of the unknown. The effectiveness of their practices had a tangible, biological basis. This knowledge also resonates deeply with us today. In our search for wellness and mental clarity, we are rediscovering the power of sound baths, binaural beats, and meditation, all of which harness these same acoustic principles to guide the brain into restorative states. The ancient builders, it seems, were the original pioneers of neuroacoustic therapy, understanding millennia ago that to heal the spirit or unite a community, you must first speak the language of the brain. To witness this acoustic mastery in its most concentrated form, we must turn our attention to the Maltese temples, a network of stone-built wonders that represent a true apex of prehistoric audio engineering. These structures are not merely old, they are precision-tuned instruments with corridors and chambers meticulously shaped to harness the physics of standing waves. A standing wave occurs when a sound wave reflects back upon itself, perfectly aligning its peaks and troughs to create areas of immense sound pressure and other areas of near silence. The builders of sites like Hypogeum and Mnajdra didn't just stumble upon this phenomenon, they engineered it. They calculated the dimensions of their rooms to match the wavelength of specific sacred chants, meaning that when priests sang, the sound wouldn't just fill the space, it would become trapped within it, amplifying and intensifying into a sustained, room-filling hum that could be physically felt vibrating through the stone floors and into the bones of every participant. This architectural tuning reaches its most sophisticated expression in the concept of the sound lens. Certain chambers were designed with curved walls and strategic openings that function like the lens of a magnifying glass focusing sunlight. But instead of focusing light, they focused acoustic energy. Archaeoacoustic surveys using modern equipment have mapped these properties with incredible detail, revealing clear hotspots where sound pressure is dramatically intensified. These focal points were never arbitrary. They were consistently aligned with altars, ceremonial basins, or carved spirals believed to be portals to the spirit world. A ritual leader standing in one part of the chamber could speak in a normal tone, and their voice would be beamed with uncanny clarity and volume directly to a specific sacred object or to another priest waiting at a receiving point. This created the undeniable illusion that the stones themselves were speaking, that the altar was alive with divine energy, or that a message was being transmitted through the ether. The physiological impact of this engineered environment would have been immediate and overwhelming. In these zones of intense sound pressure, the very air would have felt thick and heavy. The low-frequency vibrations, particularly those resonating between 90 and 120 Hz, are known to affect the vestibular system in the inner ear, which controls our sense of balance. Participants might have experienced a slight dizziness or a feeling of lightheadedness, sensations easily interpreted in a ritual context as the presence of a spirit or the first steps of a trance state. Combined with the flickering light of oil lamps, the scent of burning herbs, and the powerful rhythm of drums, this acoustic-induced euphoria would have been a catalyst for profound transcendental experiences, making abstract beliefs feel physically real and undeniable. Nowhere is this vocal synergy more apparent than in the Toxian temples. Here, archaeologists have identified specific niches and recesses carved into the walls that resonate at a frequency perfectly matching the fundamental range of the adult male voice. When a prayer was sung into one of these niches, something miraculous happened. The stone would essentially sing along, amplifying the chant's core frequency and enriching its harmonics. A single voice would be transformed into a layered chorus, swelling to fill the entire temple with a sound that felt both human and supernaturally vast. This immersive experience was designed to be unforgettable. By linking the most powerful tool of human expression, the voice, directly to the architecture, the ceremony became a collaborative act between people and place. This visceral, awe-inspiring participation didn't just tell people what to believe. It made them feel the truth of it in their bodies, creating emotional memories that bound the community together far more effectively than any written doctrine ever could. This profound acoustic strategy offers a compelling explanation for the incredible longevity and preservation of Malta's cultural identity. For nearly a millennium, these islands supported a complex temple-building society that left behind no evidence of war, weaponry, or fortifications. Their stability, it seems, was forged not by military might but by shared emotional experience. The temples were the engines of this social cohesion. Generation after generation would return to the same spaces to undergo the same powerful, acoustically driven rituals, reinforcing a collective identity and a shared worldview. The stones themselves became sacred not just for their age, but for their proven ability to facilitate connection with the divine. This deep-rooted cultural memory, centered on these unforgettable sonic landmarks, has persisted for thousands of years, influencing the island's unique character and ensuring these temples were revered and protected long after their original builders were gone. They stand today as a masterclass in how to use sound not for mere spectacle, but to build an enduring spiritual civilization. We arrive now at perhaps the most intellectually sophisticated principle of all, one that elevates ancient acoustic design from brilliant engineering to profound art: symbolic sound mapping. This concept moves beyond the physics of vibration into the realm of storytelling, where the entire architectural layout of a temple becomes a physical script for a sacred narrative, and sound is the invisible actor that brings the story to life. In many ancient cosmologies, the universe was understood as a structured, layered reality: an earthly plane, an underworld, and a heavenly realm, all connected by specific pathways. Architects began designing their temples as literal models of this cosmic order, and they used sound to animate the model, making the spiritual journey something a participant could not just believe in, but actually hear and walk through. Consider the grand, descending passageways of certain Egyptian tombs or the intricate, multi-level ziggurats of Mesopotamia. These were not merely impressive monuments, they were carefully plotted sonic landscapes. A long, narrow, downward-sloping corridor does more than lead to a burial chamber. It dramatically alters sound in a very specific way. As a funerary procession moved deeper inside, the noises from the outside world would fade away, replaced by the close, muffled echoes of their own footsteps and chants. This acoustic shift would have been interpreted as leaving the world of the living and entering the domain of the dead. The sound itself became a guide and a marker of progress on a spiritual voyage. Conversely, a sudden, reverberant chamber deep within might represent the hall of a god, where a priest's voice, amplified by the architecture, would become the voice of the deity itself, issuing commands or blessings from the underworld. This symbolic layer assigned specific meanings to acoustic effects, weaving them directly into the cultural mythos. The deep, rolling boom of thunder echoing through a canyon or a stone chamber wasn't just a loud noise, it was the audible anger of a storm god. The soft, whispering echo that seemed to answer a question might be received as the voice of an ancestor or a guiding spirit. A sharp, clapping sound that returned once, twice, or 3 times from a specific wall could be interpreted as an omen, a sign of approval or warning based on the local belief system. The architecture was designed to produce these effects reliably, ensuring that the mythological story unfolded correctly with each performance of the ritual. This turned the ceremony into an interactive drama where the environment was a co-performer, responding to the actions of the priests and the community. This intertwining of sound and symbol was a masterstroke of cultural preservation. In societies without widespread literacy, these sonic architectural stories were a primary method for encoding and transmitting the most important myths from one generation to the next. You didn't just hear a story about a perilous journey to the underworld, you physically experienced it. You walked the path, you heard your own voice change, you felt the disorientation of echoes in the dark, and you emerged back into the light and the familiar sounds of the world, having successfully completed a symbolic death and rebirth. This multi-sensory experience made the abstract concrete and the mythical personal, etching the community's core beliefs into memory with an emotional power that a simple spoken tale could never match. What this reveals about human creativity is nothing short of magnificent. It shows us that our ancestors refused to see boundaries between science, art, and spirituality. They observed the natural phenomenon of sound with a physicist's eye, harnessed it with an engineer's skill, and deployed it with a playwright's sense of drama. Their creativity was holistic, using every tool at their disposal: stone, space, and vibration, to answer the deepest human questions about life, death, and the cosmos. They understood that for a belief to be truly resilient, it had to be experienced in the body, not just understood in the mind. By mapping sound onto symbolism, they created the world's first immersive theaters, crafting experiences that resonated in the heart and the soul just as powerfully as they resonated in the air. Their toolkit, though forged from the natural world rather than a laboratory, was remarkably sophisticated. We must picture these early engineers not as mystics, but as meticulous craftspeople armed with the world's first calibrated acoustic instruments. The human voice itself was their most precise and versatile tool. By chanting at different pitches and volumes, a skilled practitioner could map the resonant frequencies of a half-built chamber, listening for the specific tones that made the stone itself seem to hum in sympathetic response. They would have marked these sweet spots, these nodes of acoustic power, and adjusted their designs accordingly, perhaps using a simple drum or a bone flute to replicate and hold a steady frequency for others to hear. These instruments weren't just for ceremony, they were the essential measuring devices of a pre-scientific age, the tuning forks and signal generators of their time. Their methodology was rooted in profound observation of the natural world. Long before they ever set stone upon stone, they would have studied the acoustics of the landscapes around them. They learned the echoing properties of deep canyons where a shout could travel for miles. They noted the strange, whispering galleries that sometimes formed in sea caves, where a murmur on one side could be heard with startling clarity on the other. Their genius lay in recognizing these natural phenomena not as random curiosities, but as reproducible principles. The challenge they set for themselves was breathtaking: to capture the echo of a canyon and contain it within a man-made wall, to distill the whisper of a cave and embed it into a carved niche. This process of reverse engineering nature is the very foundation of their acoustic science. Evidence suggests their experimentation was both ingenious and hands-on. Imagine builders sprinkling fine dust or sand onto a flat stone slab and then striking it nearby. The patterns formed by the jumping grains would have provided a visible map of the sound vibrations, revealing nodes and anti-nodes long before they had the mathematics to describe them. They might have used containers filled with water to observe the ripples and standing waves created by a consistent tone, giving them a fluid, dynamic model of how sound energy moves through a space. This was an empirical, trial-and-error process that demanded immense patience. It required a community working in concert, with one generation carefully passing its hard-won knowledge to the next through oral tradition and direct apprenticeship. A master builder wouldn't just teach how to lift a stone, they would teach how to listen to it, how to strike it and judge its ring, its density, and its potential to sing. This pragmatic creativity reveals a form of problem-solving that seamlessly wove together art and science. They were likely less concerned with the abstract why of sound and wholly focused on the practical how. How do we make this chamber amplify a whisper? How do we make this corridor throw a voice to that specific spot? Their solutions were elegant because they were direct, born from an intimate dialogue between material, maker, and sound. This approach holds a powerful lesson for modern acoustic science, which can sometimes become siloed in complex equations and digital simulations. The ancients remind us of the irreplaceable value of physical intuition, of tapping a wall and listening, of using the entire body as a sensor to feel vibration and resonance. Their work suggests that some of the most profound discoveries await not just in the digital realm, but in a renewed, hands-on communion with the physical properties of our materials and the spaces we shape. This mastery of emotional contouring represents perhaps the most sophisticated layer of ancient acoustic engineering, transforming static stone chambers into dynamic instruments of feeling. It wasn't enough to simply create a space that resonated or echoed. The true artistry lay in designing environments where sound could be actively shaped and directed to guide participants through a carefully orchestrated emotional journey. Imagine a ceremony beginning in near-total silence, the only sound the nervous breathing of the gathered community. A priest might start with a low, barely audible hum, a sound that the architecture would gently amplify, wrapping the room in a soft, meditative drone conducive to introspection and anticipation. This quiet beginning wasn't just a practical choice, it was an acoustic opening act, a way of drawing people inward and preparing them for what was to come. The real magic happened with the sudden, dramatic shifts. Evidence from sites across Europe and the Mediterranean suggests the use of ingenious architectural features that functioned like primitive soundboards. Some temples featured massive, carefully balanced stone slabs that could be slid open or closed, acting as enormous acoustic baffles. In one position, the chamber might be dry and intimate, absorbing sound. With a slab moved, it could suddenly become a cavernous, reverberant space. Priests could also manipulate hidden vents or shutters, altering how sound waves reflected and mixed. A single, sharp command, uttered just as a door was opened, could transform from a human voice into a thunderous, god-like proclamation that seemed to erupt from the walls themselves. This wasn't a gradual change, it was an acoustic jump scare, a moment of calculated shock designed to trigger a visceral, collective gasp and a surge of adrenaline among the participants. These dynamic peaks were strategically placed to coincide with the narrative climax of a ritual. During a reenactment of a creation myth, the moment a deity was said to bring forth light might be marked by a priest striking a drum at the exact instant a shutter was opened, creating a percussive blast that felt like the birth of the universe. In an initiation rite, a seeker standing in a specific sweet spot might hear a whisper from across the room suddenly swell into a deafening roar right beside their ear, simulating a personal revelation or divine visitation. Acoustic modeling of these spaces reveals these hotspots with precision, specific points where sound pressure would concentrate, often aligned with altars, sacred art, or seating areas for elders. This ensured the most powerful sonic experiences were delivered to the people whose belief and authority were most critical to the community's stability. This orchestration served a profound narrative purpose. By mapping sonic dynamics onto the story beats of their myths, the ritual leaders made abstract tales physically real. The quiet, fearful journey into the underworld was sonically represented by muffled footsteps and distant, distorted echoes. The triumphant return of a hero or a harvest deity was accompanied by a crescendo of clear, ringing chants and the resonant boom of drums, a sonic celebration that everyone could feel in their chest. This multi-sensory storytelling bypassed intellectual skepticism and forged a direct connection to emotion and memory. Participants didn't just hear a story about their gods, they felt the fear, the tension, the awe, and the joy alongside the narrative, experiencing the myth as a personal, emotional event. What this ancient practice teaches us is a timeless truth about the power of sound in narrative. Modern filmmakers and composers understand this intuitively, using score and sound design to manipulate an audience's feelings, building tension with quiet strings before releasing it with a sudden, loud sting. The ancient priests were the original masters of this craft. They understood that to control the emotional arc of a ceremony was to control the meaning people took from it. A ritual that ended on a powerful, unified sonic climax, with everyone chanting together in a loud, resonant space, would send people out into the world feeling connected, empowered, and reaffirmed in their beliefs. The temple, therefore, was far more than a backdrop. It was the ultimate storytelling device, an emotional instrument played with breathtaking skill to compose experiences that shaped the very foundation of cultural identity. The true genius of the Hypogeum's oracle room lies not in its grand scale, but in its breathtaking acoustic precision. This small, almost claustrophobic chamber, carved deep within the labyrinth, functions as a perfect Helmholtz resonator. The principle is simple yet profound. A small opening, the niche, connects to a larger enclosed body of air, the chamber itself. When sound is produced within that niche, the entire system vibrates at its natural resonant frequency, trapping and amplifying that specific tone with incredible efficiency. In the oracle room, that frequency is centered around 110 Hz. Modern acoustic analysis reveals this is not a happy accident. The dimensions of the niche and the volume of the chamber are mathematically aligned to produce this exact sonic effect. A voice speaking into that niche isn't just made louder. Its fundamental frequency is isolated and intensified, transforming human speech into a pervasive, room-filling hum that seems to emanate from the stone itself. This carefully engineered phenomenon has a direct and measurable impact on human consciousness. Neuroscientific research, including studies led by figures like Dr. Ian Cook at UCLA, has demonstrated that exposure to sustained low-frequency sound in the 100 to 120 Hz range can produce a notable shift in brain activity. It appears to reduce activity in the brain's left prefrontal cortex, an area associated with linear thinking, language processing, and our critical, analytical faculties. Simultaneously, it can stimulate activity in the limbic system, the brain's emotional core, which governs mood, memory, and our sense of awe. The architecture of the oracle room, therefore, was quite literally designed to dial down skepticism and dial up emotional receptivity. In the context of a ceremony, this would make participants extraordinarily suggestible, primed to accept the prophetic messages delivered by a ritual specialist as undeniable divine truth. The psychological impact is further intensified by the phenomenon of auditory disorientation. In that confined space, the amplified, resonant sound waves reflect off every hard surface, creating a dense cloud of overlapping echoes. This acoustic fog destroys our natural ability to locate the source of a sound, a skill known as auditory spatial awareness. A voice that seems to come from everywhere at once is to our primal brain a voice from nowhere, a voice without a body. This perceptual trick is a powerful trigger for feelings of the supernatural. When we cannot pinpoint the origin of a sound, our instinct is to attribute it to an unseen, non-human agency. In the flickering torchlight of the Hypogeum, this would have been interpreted as the undeniable presence of spirits or ancestors, their voices made audibly real through the stone. This manufactured mystery was the absolute cornerstone of religious authority for the temple builders. The ability to orchestrate such an undeniable, visceral experience of the divine granted the ritual leaders an unimpeachable form of power. They were not merely interpreters of vague signs, they were the masters of the technology that made the gods speak. This control over the bridge between the human and divine realms established a social hierarchy that was both profound and incredibly stable. The community's faith was constantly reinforced not by abstract doctrine, but by shared, awe-inspiring sensory proof experienced deep within the earth. Maintaining this power across centuries required an immense investment in preserving this secret acoustic science. Knowledge of the chamber's properties, the specific chants, and the ritual procedures would have been guarded closely, passed down through generations within a privileged priestly class. This oral tradition was their most valuable possession, ensuring that the mystery and the authority it conferred remained intact for over a millennium. This brings us to a principle that reveals the ultimate purpose behind all this acoustic ingenuity: the transformation of the temple into a living, breathing library. In a world without the written word, the survival of a culture depended entirely on memory. Myths, laws, genealogies, and histories had to be perfectly preserved and passed down through countless generations solely through oral tradition. The slightest misremembering could mean the loss of an entire creation story or a crucial rule for survival. This immense pressure gave rise to the eighth acoustic principle, cultural transmission through sonic mnemonics. The architects of these spaces discovered that sound, when engineered correctly, could become the most powerful mnemonic device ever invented, etching critical information directly into the long-term memory of every participant. The method was breathtakingly simple yet profoundly effective. By linking a specific piece of information to a unique and powerful sensory experience, they created an unforgettable associative chain. Imagine a creation myth that tells of a great spirit striking a drum to bring forth the world. Now, imagine that during the ceremonial retelling of this myth, a priest actually strikes a drum in a chamber specifically tuned to amplify that percussive strike into a thunderous, room-shaking boom that vibrates through your entire body. The story and the sound become inextricably fused. Forever after hearing that particular echo pattern, perhaps even just the memory of it would instantly and vividly trigger the recall of the entire myth. The sound itself became the bookmark, the retrieval cue for a vast amount of cultural data. This wasn't just storytelling, it was sonic branding of information, making wisdom sticky, durable, and resistant to the corruption of time. This technique mirrors the very foundations of modern memory science, which teaches that multi-sensory encoding is the key to strong recall. We remember things better when we attach them to emotions, to physical sensations, and to unique context. The ancient ceremonies leveraged this principle to its absolute maximum. The combination of the story's narrative, the emotional charge of the ritual, the unique smell of burning herbs, the flickering firelight, and above all, the distinctive, engineered soundscape created a multi-layered memory imprint that was virtually impossible to forget. An elder teaching a young initiate wouldn't just recite a list of ancestors. They would take them to a specific spot in the temple, have them face a certain wall, and speak the names in a rhythm that the architecture would then catch and throw back in a specific pattern. The location and the sound became part of the data itself. The effectiveness of this system explains the incredible accuracy of oral traditions that managed to survive for millennia. It wasn't just about rote repetition, it was about embedding information within a reproducible, full-body experience. The temple was the hard drive, and the ritual was the software that accessed the data. This turns our understanding of these spaces on its head. They were not passive repositories but active generators of cultural continuity. Every ceremony was a collective downloading of essential software, a reboot of the community's identity, laws, and shared history. The resonant frequencies acted as a sonic glue, binding fact to feeling and ensuring that the most important lessons of the past were not just learned, but felt and remembered in the bones of every new generation, guaranteeing the survival of the culture itself. This ancient drive to shape sound for emotional and spiritual benefit is not a relic of the past. It is a living legacy that continues to resonate through our modern world, from the grandest concert halls to the most intimate wellness spaces. The fundamental principles discovered in those prehistoric temples, the power of resonance, the careful control of reverberation, the strategic use of material, are the very same principles that guide acoustic engineers today. When architects design a world-class performance venue like the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles or the Elbphilharmonie in Hamburg, they are engaged in the same pursuit as the builders of Newgrange, creating an environment where sound doesn't just travel but transforms. They use advanced computer modeling to calculate reflection paths and precisely angled surfaces, a high-tech evolution of the intuitive stone shaping practiced millennia ago, all to achieve that same goal of an immersive, emotionally transporting auditory experience. This connection is made explicit in the work of visionary architects and theorists like Christopher Alexander. In his seminal book, A Pattern Language, he argues for designing buildings and towns in a way that makes people feel whole and alive, drawing direct inspiration from the organic, human-centric designs of ancient and vernacular architecture. Many of his 253 patterns are deeply acoustic, even if not always labeled as such. Patterns like light on two sides of every room create not just visual delight, but also specific sonic atmospheres, while ceiling height variety directly dictates the sound and feel of a space, moving from intimate, quiet low ceilings to grand, reverberant vaults. Alexander's philosophy champions the idea that spaces should serve the emotional and psychological needs of their inhabitants, a concept those Neolithic builders understood instinctively. They knew a successful ritual required a specific sonic emotion, and they engineered their stone to provide it. Modern architects following this pattern language are, in a very real sense, rediscovering that ancient truth. Perhaps the most direct descendant of these ancient practices is the rapidly growing field of sound healing and acoustic therapy. Modern practitioners may use polished quartz crystal singing bowls or precisely calibrated tuning forks instead of chanting into limestone niches, but the intended outcome is strikingly similar. They employ specific frequencies, often those same low ranges around 110 Hz, to promote states of deep relaxation, reduce stress, and alleviate anxiety. This isn't just New Age speculation. It's increasingly supported by scientific research into the effects of sound vibration on the human nervous system, brainwave patterns, and heart rate variability. The ancient priests were the original sound therapists, using the architecture itself as their instrument to guide their community toward a desired physiological and emotional state. Today, we are simply using portable technology to bring that same resonant healing into a modern context, seeking the same biological benefits our ancestors experienced in their echoing stone chambers. This profound continuity suggests something fundamental about our species. Our attraction to certain acoustic environments appears to be hardwired, a deep-seated preference forged in the fire of our earliest rituals. The awe we feel standing in a great cathedral, the comfort we find in a small, quiet room with soft furnishings, the exhilaration of a cheering sports stadium, these are not arbitrary reactions. They are echoes of our ancestral past, physiological memories of the spaces that once ensured our cultural survival by making us feel connected, safe, and part of something larger than ourselves. Our neurology hasn't changed. We still respond to those same sonic triggers that once promoted social bonding and transcendental experience. This realization forces a critical question for our contemporary world, which is so often filled with chaotic noise and acoustically sterile environments. What can we learn from these ancient designs to improve our modern spaces for human well-being? The answer lies in moving beyond treating acoustics as merely a problem of noise cancellation and into the realm of intentional sonic curation. We can design our homes, our workplaces, and our public buildings not just to be quiet, but to be resonant in ways that support our mental health. This could mean incorporating materials that provide a warm, gentle reverberation in a living room to make it feel more welcoming, or creating quiet alcoves in offices that offer true auditory respite. It means understanding that the sound of a space is as critical to its feel as its lighting or layout. The legacy of prehistoric acoustics is a powerful reminder that sound is not just a physical phenomenon but a fundamental, shaping force of human experience, and that its intentional design is not a luxury, but a vital component of creating spaces that truly make us feel alive. Now we arrive at a principle that reveals the flip side of ancient acoustic engineering. a concept that is every bit as sophisticated as resonance or amplification, but serves a completely different social purpose: acoustic secrecy and exclusion. While many designs were created to unify the community in a shared emotional experience, others were meticulously crafted to divide, to create auditory channels that were accessible only to a chosen few. This wasn't about collective awe, it was about controlled information, mystery, and the reinforcement of power through the strategic withholding of sound. In numerous ancient sites, we find evidence of what are known as whispering galleries or sound mirrors, architectural features that can project a whisper with stunning clarity over astonishing distances, but only along a very specific, narrow path. A quintessential example of this can be found deep within the Mayan temple complex of Palenque. Here, narrow, stone-lined passages and strategically angled interior stairways function with the precision of a modern fiber optic cable, but for sound. A priest standing at one end of such a corridor could speak in a hushed, almost inaudible tone, and their words would travel, undiminished and crystal clear, to another priest waiting dozens of feet away. For anyone else in the main chamber, the communication would be completely silent and utterly undetectable. This created a private network within the very heart of a public ceremony, allowing the ruling elite to coordinate complex rituals, issue commands, or stage manage miraculous-seeming events without the general audience ever knowing. Imagine the impact of a head priest pausing during a ceremony, appearing to listen to the walls, and then announcing a divine message that had just been whispered into his ear from a hidden colleague, a message that seemingly came from the temple itself. The psychological effect of this acoustic exclusion was profound. For the initiates privy to the secret, it fostered an immense sense of privilege and inner circle belonging. They were the keepers of the mystery, the ones who knew how the trick was done. This knowledge bonded them tightly together and cemented their loyalty to the power structure. For the wider audience, however, it deepened the sense of wonder and the unquestionable authority of the priesthood. When events unfolded with seemingly supernatural coordination, or when a leader appeared to receive messages from the stones, it wasn't just impressive, it was irrefutable proof of their divine connection. The inability to hear the source of the communication made it magical, reinforcing the social hierarchy by making the elite's access to the gods feel audibly real and exclusive. This wasn't a blunt instrument of power, it was a subtle, psychological technology of persuasion. The construction of these features reveals an almost unbelievable level of geometric sophistication. Creating a reliable whispering gallery isn't as simple as building two flat, parallel walls. It requires a precise understanding of the physics of sound wave propagation. The surfaces often need to be parabolic or elliptical in shape. In a perfect ellipse, for instance, sound waves emanating from one focal point will reflect off the walls and converge exactly at the other focal point, regardless of where you stand along the curve. The ancient builders had to be able to calculate these curves and then execute them in stone with meticulous accuracy. This indicates that their knowledge was not merely based on accidental discovery. It was a refined science developed through generations of observation, experimentation, and precise craftsmanship. The intentionality is clear. They weren't just building spaces for sound. They were building spaces for specific sounds to be heard by specific people. This principle forces us to expand our understanding of ancient acoustic engineering. It shows that sound was a tool of social architecture as much as it was spiritual technology. The control of auditory access was a primary method for maintaining social order, spiritual authority, and political stability. By designing who heard what and when, the ruling class could manage the narrative of a ceremony in real time, ensuring that their power was perceived not as a human invention, but as a natural divine law. The temple's design made this social structure feel as immutable and eternal as the stones themselves. In the end, these secret sonic passages remind us that the power of sound lies not only in its awesome presence, but also in its calculated and deliberate absence. This seamless weaving of the environment into the ceremony represents one of the most sophisticated concepts in prehistoric acoustic design. The passage tombs of Ireland, like the magnificent Newgrange, were not built as sealed sanctuaries to keep the outside world at bay. Instead, they were constructed as resonant instruments designed to actively incorporate the external soundscape, transforming mundane noises into the very voice of the ritual itself. The long, narrow entrance passages, some stretching over 60 feet and built with massive, closely fitted orthostats, function with the precision of a modern acoustic waveguide. This architectural form is brilliantly efficient at channeling sound waves from one end to the other with minimal dispersion or loss of energy. A whisper at the entrance would not fade into the darkness. It would travel, focused and clear, directly into the central chamber, as if the stones themselves were carrying the message. This had a profound and likely intentional psychological effect. For participants gathered in the inner chamber during a ceremony, any sound from the exterior world, the howl of the wind across the entrance, the distant call of an animal, the rumble of an approaching storm, or even the footsteps of late arrivals would be captured by this stone channel and delivered into the heart of the tomb. These sounds would be subtly altered by their journey, gaining a slight resonance and an otherworldly quality. A sudden gust of wind might arrive as a deep, sighing breath. The cry of a bird could be warped into an ethereal whistle. In the absolute darkness, save for the flickering light of a small fire or lamp, the origin of these sounds would be completely ambiguous. They would not be perceived as coming from outside, but as emerging from the very fabric of the tomb, from the carved spirals on the walls, or from the realm of the ancestors believed to reside there. The genius of this design lay in its interpretive flexibility. The meaning of these sounds was not fixed. It was shaped by the context of the ceremony and the guidance of the ritual leaders. The same low, moaning sound carried on the wind could be interpreted as a mournful lament from the underworld during a funeral rite, or as a comforting, protective presence during a seasonal celebration. The priests or shamans presiding over the event held the power to frame these acoustic events, to give the ambiguous noises a specific, meaningful narrative. This turned the entire ceremony into an interactive dialogue where the environment itself seemed to be participating, validating the rituals and responding to the actions of the community. It made the spiritual world audibly tangible, blurring the line between the natural and the supernatural in a way that was both awe-inspiring and deeply persuasive. Modern archaeoacoustic testing with sophisticated equipment has provided startling data to support this interpretation. Studies conducted within these passage tombs have confirmed that their geometry naturally amplifies and emphasizes a very specific low-frequency range between 90 and 120 Hz. This is no coincidence. This bandwidth sits squarely within the fundamental frequency of the adult male voice, the range we associate with authority, gravitas, and emotional depth. It is also the same frequency band that can induce shifts in brain activity, promoting states of heightened suggestibility and emotional receptivity. The architecture was literally tuned to the human voice and the human nervous system, ensuring that any sound entering the tomb, whether human, animal, or elemental, was filtered and amplified to sound profoundly significant and emotionally charged. This holistic approach reveals a world view where humanity was not separate from nature, but an integrated part of a living, sounding cosmos. The builders of Newgrange and its sister sites like Noath and Douth did not see the wind as random weather patterns. They likely heard it as the breath of the land. They didn't hear a random animal cry, they heard a potential message. By designing a tomb that acted as a listening ear pointed directly at the world, they created a permanent conduit for this communication. The ceremony, therefore, was not an isolated performance by people for the gods. It was a collaborative event involving the entire community, the spirits of the ancestors within the tomb, and the active, vocal presence of the natural world outside. This integration made the spiritual significance of these sites undeniable. Every ceremony was unique, dynamically scored in real time by the environment, making each ritual an authentic, unpredictable, and unforgettable encounter with the divine. This final principle brings us to the ultimate purpose behind all this architectural ingenuity, revealing that the true masterpiece wasn't the stone itself, but the human community it helped to forge. These ritual soundscapes were the original social glue, a sophisticated technology of belonging that used synchronized emotion to turn a gathering of individuals into a unified, cohesive whole. When a deep, resonant drumbeat vibrated through the chest of everyone in a chamber, or a sudden, thunderous echo from the walls made an entire group gasp in unison, something profound happened neurologically. This shared, startling auditory stimulus would have triggered a simultaneous release of neurotransmitters like dopamine and oxytocin across the entire audience, chemicals directly linked to feelings of trust, pleasure, and social bonding. In that synchronized moment of awe, separate heartbeats and breathing patterns could actually begin to entrain, aligning the physiological states of the participants and creating a powerful, non-verbal sense of connection. The sociological support for this is robust and fascinating. Modern studies on collective effervescence, the phenomenon of shared emotional excitement in group settings, show that synchronized activities, especially those driven by rhythm and sound, dramatically increase cooperation and reduce conflict within communities. This wasn't just about feeling good for prehistoric societies, it was a critical survival strategy. In a world of constant environmental threat and scarce resources, a group that could act as one, that could trust, share, and cooperate without hesitation, had a significant advantage. The ceremony, amplified and guided by its acoustic design, was the training ground for this essential unity. It transformed abstract concepts like community or shared belief from ideas into felt, physical experiences. A participant didn't just believe they were part of a tribe, they felt it vibrating in their bones alongside everyone else, creating a collective memory so vivid and emotionally charged that it became a cornerstone of their identity. This ancient technology of togetherness finds its direct descendants in our modern collective experiences. The roar of a crowd in a packed sports stadium that rises and falls as one, the shared silence of a concert hall just before the first note rings out, the collective gasp in a movie theater during a jump scare, these are all modern rituals where engineered sound synchronizes our emotions and reinforces our sense of shared identity. We may not attribute these events to divine forces, but the neurological and social effects are strikingly similar. We leave a great concert feeling connected to thousands of strangers, bonded by the shared journey of the music. This is the same primal mechanism the ancients harnessed, proving that our need to feel part of a larger whole through shared experience is a fundamental, enduring part of the human condition. The brilliance of these ancient engineers was in their understanding that to build a resilient society, you must first build a shared emotional reality. They used acoustics not for mere spectacle, but as a practical social tool, crafting environments that guaranteed the emotional synchrony necessary for cooperation and cultural continuity. In the resonant dark of their temples, individuality softened and the collective was strengthened, ensuring that the lessons, stories, and values of the culture were not just heard, but felt and remembered by every member of the community. This sonic social contract, written in vibration and echo, may be one of the most important and overlooked reasons these early cultures were able to thrive for millennia, reminding us that the most foundational technology we possess is not microchips or steel, but the profound, innate power of sound to unite us. This exploration of ancient acoustic mastery inevitably leads us to a profound and necessary ethical crossroads. While we can marvel at the ingenuity of these prehistoric engineers, we must also confront the complex reality that this technology of sound was a tool of immense social power, one that could elevate the human spirit just as easily as it could manipulate it. The very techniques that created awe-inspiring, unifying spiritual experiences also provided a select few with an unparalleled ability to shape belief and behavior, often bypassing rational thought to speak directly to the emotions. A priest or shaman, armed with the knowledge of a chamber's resonant secrets, could stage-manage divine interventions, deliver prophecies with thunderous authority, and forge an unbreakable link between their own leadership and the will of the gods. This acoustic authority could be used to demand immense sacrifices, from vast material resources for temple construction to the ultimate sacrifice of human life, all justified by a soundscape that made the commands feel undeniably real. This historical duality forces a critical examination of our own modern soundscape. The principles of acoustic engineering discovered in those ancient temples have not been forgotten. They have been refined and deployed on a scale those early builders could never have imagined. Today, we are constantly surrounded by engineered sound designed to trigger specific emotional and behavioral responses, often without our conscious awareness or consent. The carefully crafted sonic logo of a major corporation, designed to evoke feelings of trust and familiarity, uses the same principles of memorable, resonant frequency that once encoded cultural myths into memory. The pulsating, overwhelming music and precisely timed applause in a political rally are engineered to synchronize the crowd's emotions, creating a wave of collective fervor that can override individual critical thinking, mirroring the rhythmic entrainment facilitated by ancient stone circles. Even the architecture of commerce is acoustically curated. Casinos are famously designed without clocks or windows and filled with a constant, stimulating cacophony of ringing slots and chatter to disorient patrons and encourage longer play. Many retail stores use carefully selected background music tempos to unconsciously influence the pace at which shoppers move through the aisles, directly affecting purchasing behavior. This pervasive, often subconscious, acoustic influence raises urgent ethical questions. Where do we draw the line between creating an uplifting environment and employing psychological manipulation? When does persuasive design become coercive engineering? The ancient precedent shows us that the power of sound to bypass our analytical defenses is not a new phenomenon, but its modern application is more subtle, ubiquitous, and divorced from any communal spiritual purpose. Understanding this deep history empowers us to become more critical listeners and more intentional designers of our own sonic environments. It invites us to reclaim agency over the sound that fills our lives, to question the emotional triggers embedded in the media we consume and the spaces we inhabit. This awareness is the first step toward ethical acoustic design, a commitment to harnessing this incredible power for transparency, well-being, and genuine connection rather than for covert influence. Imagine applying these ancient principles for positive ends, designing hospitals with sound-absorbing materials and resonant frequencies proven to reduce patient anxiety and promote healing, or creating classrooms with acoustics that enhance focus and information retention for every student. The legacy of these prehistoric temples is not merely a collection of clever acoustic tricks. It is a mirror reflecting the dual nature of all powerful technology. Sound can be a bridge to the transcendent or a tool of control. It can unite a community in shared wonder or manipulate it through manufactured awe. The choice has always lain not with the technology itself, but with the ethics of those who wield it. By studying how our ancestors first discovered and grappled with this power, we gain the wisdom to navigate our own increasingly engineered world, striving to ensure that the voices we amplify, whether through stone or speaker, are those that encourage empathy, truth, and human flourishing. This remarkable adaptability reveals an 11th acoustic principle that moves beyond static design into the realm of dynamic, responsive architecture. These ancient builders understood that a community's needs were not monolithic. A temple had to serve as both a hushed chamber for personal communion and a grand hall for public proclamation. Evidence from sites across Europe and the Mediterranean suggests they achieved this versatility through what we might call adaptive acoustics, ingenious, often temporary modifications that allowed them to fine-tune a space's sonic character for the specific ceremony at hand. Imagine teams of attendants hanging heavy woven textiles from stone hooks still visible on the walls, their presence soaking up excess reverberation to create a drier, more intimate atmosphere for whispered prayers or confidential divination. Conversely, removing these drapes or opening concealed stone shutters would allow sound to bounce freely between hard surfaces, transforming the same chamber into a reverberant arena perfect for delivering pronouncements to a large assembly or for the ecstatic, drum-driven dances of a seasonal festival. The mechanisms for this acoustic tailoring were both elegant and pragmatic. At certain Neolithic sites, archaeologists have found large, flat stones that appear designed to be slid over wall niches or ventilation shafts, effectively altering the volume of a chamber and its resonant frequency in the process. Other locations show evidence of movable standing stones or large ceramic pots that could be positioned to act as primitive bass traps or acoustic diffusers, breaking up standing waves that caused muddy sound in one configuration but enhancing desirable resonance in another. This wasn't guesswork. Acoustic simulations of these spaces show that even seemingly minor adjustments could produce dramatic shifts in reverberation time and clarity. A change of just a few hundred milliseconds in how long a sound persisted could make the difference between a clear, intelligible instruction and an awe-inspiring, mystical rumble, allowing the same physical space to support both legal proceedings and transcendental ritual. This flexibility was absolutely critical for the social and spiritual health of early settled communities. A temple was far more than a place of worship. It was the community's town hall, its emergency shelter, its courtroom, and its cultural center. In the span of a single moon cycle, the same space might need to host a somber funeral rite requiring quiet intimacy, a joyous harvest celebration demanding booming, energetic acoustics, and a council of elders where every whispered word of strategy needed to be heard with perfect clarity. The ability to adapt the soundscape to each function made the temple the true heart of communal life, a versatile vessel that could hold the entire spectrum of human experience. This pragmatic innovation sits comfortably alongside the spiritual purpose, demonstrating that these cultures did not see the sacred and the practical as separate realms, but as intertwined necessities for a thriving society. The drive for such adaptable spaces offers a profound window into the minds of these evolving societies. It reflects a sophisticated understanding that community is built on a variety of shared experiences, each with its own emotional and acoustic requirements. A society that could dynamically redesign its central space was a society prepared for change, capable of responding to new challenges, integrating different ideas, and hosting a diversity of rituals that strengthened different social bonds. This acoustic versatility provided a foundation for cultural resilience, allowing traditions to evolve and new practices to emerge without requiring the immense labor of constructing a new sacred space for every novel need. It stands as a powerful testament to their ingenuity, proving that the most advanced technology is often that which serves life in all its beautiful, unpredictable variety. The stone circles scattered across the British Isles, like the iconic Ring of Brodgar or the mysterious rollright stones, present a fascinating acoustic paradox. Unlike the enclosed chambers of Malta or the focused ball courts of the Maya, these open-air monuments interact with sound in a uniquely dynamic and almost playful way. Their power lies not in containing or amplifying sound in one direction, but in sculpting it through a landscape of standing stones, creating a complex and invisible topography of sonic intensity. Modern archaeoacoustic research, using sophisticated audio equipment and computer modeling, has mapped these spaces to reveal they function like primitive but highly effective surround sound systems. The key to this effect is a phenomenon known as wave interference. When a sound is produced inside a stone circle, the waves radiate outward until they hit the hard, reflective surfaces of the monoliths. These waves then bounce back into the circle, crossing paths with the original sound waves and with each other. Where the peaks of these waves align, they combine to create zones of powerful amplification, known as constructive interference. In these acoustic hotspots, a whisper can be heard with startling clarity from many feet away. Conversely, where the peak of one wave meets the trough of another, they cancel each other out, creating pockets of near silence or destructive interference. This means that within the very same ceremony, two people standing just a few paces apart could have completely different auditory experiences, one immersed in a thunderous chorus of chanting, the other in an eerie, muffled quiet. This intricate design would have transformed ceremonies into highly interactive, almost theatrical journeys. A ritual leader wouldn't just stand at an altar. They could move between specific stones, their voice appearing and disappearing as they navigated these predetermined acoustic pathways. Participants might be guided to move through the circle themselves, physically walking through different emotional and sonic fields. One moment they could be in a zone of overwhelming collective sound, feeling united with the entire group, and the next they could step into a bubble of profound isolation, perhaps intended for personal reflection or a moment of solitary communion with the divine. This wasn't a static performance but an immersive, multi-sensory ritual where the architecture itself dictated the narrative flow, making the spiritual journey a physical one as well. The presence of these effects strongly suggests a culture that engaged in deep, experimental play with sound. The builders likely discovered these properties through generations of trial and error, perhaps initially noticing how a shout between two standing stones carried differently than a shout in an open field. This would have sparked a process of deliberate experimentation, adding stones, adjusting their spacing and alignment, and carefully listening to the results. The final construction, therefore, represents a cumulative acoustic wisdom, a map of sonic possibilities carefully laid out in stone. This blend of utility and mystery is central to their enduring appeal. The circles were pragmatically useful, potentially allowing for clear communication between specific points during large gatherings or markets, but they also masterfully cultivated a sense of wonder, making the invisible force of sound tangibly magical. This enduring allure explains why these sites were used and revered for millennia, long after their original builders were gone. A space that can make the environment itself seem responsive and alive becomes permanently sacred. The acoustic properties provided a continuous source of validation for the site's spiritual power. Every generation that experienced the whispering stones would have its beliefs reinforced. This deep, multi-generational engagement etched the circles into the cultural memory of the landscape, transforming them from ritual sites into timeless anchors of identity and legend. Today, we are captivated by that same magic. Even without the chanting and drums, visitors often report strange auditory sensations, a sudden hush, a misplaced echo, the feeling of being watched by the stones. We are responding to the same acoustic architecture, the same engineered mystery that speaks to a very ancient part of our consciousness, reminding us that these monuments are not silent ruins but instruments waiting for the right conditions to once again play their ancient song. This fusion of visual art and acoustic science reveals a 12th principle so sophisticated it challenges our very definition of prehistoric thought: sonic symbolism. The builders of these temples didn't just engineer sound, they gave it a visual language, carving and painting their understanding of vibration and resonance directly onto the very stones that produced them. This created a complete, multisensory feedback loop where the eye confirmed what the ear experienced, and the mind absorbed the lesson as an undeniable truth. The most pervasive and powerful of these symbols is the spiral, a motif found etched into the walls of ancient temples from Ireland to Malta. Modern acoustic testing has now confirmed a startling pattern. These spirals are consistently located in spots with the most pronounced acoustic effects. A spiral might mark the very spot where a chant produces the clearest echo, or where a deep hum resonates most powerfully in the chest. The carving was a map and a manual, a permanent signpost indicating, "Stand here and speak to experience the divine." This was far more than simple decoration. It was a sophisticated method of encoding and transmitting complex knowledge across generations without a written language. The spiral didn't just represent an echo. Its form mimicked the motion of sound waves themselves, energy radiating outward from a central point, circling and reverberating. Other common motifs, like concentric circles or zigzag patterns, likely symbolized different acoustic phenomena: the rippling interference of sound waves or the sharp, percussive quality of a clap reflecting off a specific surface. This visual vocabulary allowed a master builder to teach an apprentice the sacred science of acoustics. He could point to a spiral and say, "Carve the chamber so that the voice creates this pattern here." The art ensured that the precise acoustic intentionality behind the temple's design would not be lost, preserving its ritual efficacy for centuries. This interplay between image and sound profoundly enriched the cultural meaning of these spaces, transforming them from places of worship into holistic environments of total immersion. A participant wouldn't just hear a reverberant chant, they could also fix their eyes on a swirling spiral that visually represented the sound's endless journey around the chamber. This synesthetic experience, the blending of senses, would have made the abstract concept of resonance feel tangibly, visually real. It deepened the mystery and the majesty, suggesting that the forces at play were so fundamental to the universe that they had a visible geometry, a sacred pattern that could be seen and heard. The temple itself became a grand, interactive diagram of cosmic order, where the physics of sound was woven into the very fabric of spiritual belief. This artistic encoding also served a crucial democratic purpose. While the deepest acoustic secrets might have been reserved for priests, the basic symbols were out in the open for all to see. Every community member, upon seeing a spiral, would understand its association with the magical voices of the temple. This shared visual language reinforced a collective identity built around these acoustic wonders. It reminded everyone that the power of their sacred site was not random but designed, a permanent feature of their world as reliable as the seasons. The carvings were a constant visual reminder of the community's shared auditory experiences, bonding them together not just through what they heard in the temple, but through what they saw every day. This integration of art and science stands as an ultimate testament to the holistic genius of these ancient cultures, who refused to compartmentalize knowledge and instead crafted a world where everything sight, sound, stone, and spirit was connected in one resonant, harmonious whole. The field of archaeoacoustics is on the cusp of a revolution, propelled by digital technologies that are granting us unprecedented access to the sonic world of our ancestors. We are no longer limited to taking measurements in fragile sites or making educated guesses. We can now step inside a perfect acoustic replica of a prehistoric temple from anywhere on the planet. The key to this breakthrough is sophisticated 3D laser scanning and photogrammetry, which capture every minute contour and imperfection of a stone surface with millimeter accuracy. This incredibly detailed spatial data is then fed into acoustic simulation software, originally developed for designing modern concert halls, which can calculate precisely how sound waves would have behaved in that exact environment thousands of years ago. This allows researchers to conduct experiments that were once impossible. They can digitally test a theory by virtually placing a sound source, a chant, a drum, a conch shell trumpet, at a specific point and listening to how the architecture transforms it. They can simulate the presence of a crowd of 50 or 100 people, understanding how bodies absorb and reflect sound, to hear the difference between an intimate gathering and a grand ceremony. Most importantly, they can do this without ever touching the ancient walls, preserving these irreplaceable sites for future generations while still unlocking their secrets. This isn't just about recreating a sound, it's about recreating an experience, allowing us to test hypotheses about ritual practices, social hierarchy, and psychological impact with a level of scientific rigor that was unimaginable just a decade ago. The most immersive application of this technology is the emergence of virtual reality soundscapes. Donning a VR headset and high-fidelity headphones, a researcher, or even a member of the public can now stand in the exact center of the Hal-Saflioni Hypogeum's oracle room, hear their own voice resonate at 110 Hz, and feel the disorienting power of its echoes, all from a laboratory or living room halfway across the world. This visceral, first-person experience is more than a novelty, it's a powerful analytical tool. It allows for a phenomenological understanding, a way of knowing that comes from direct sensory engagement. Suddenly, the written accounts of ancient historians or the theories of archaeologists can be felt in the body, providing intuitive insights that raw data alone cannot convey. These digital tools are opening entirely new lines of inquiry into how sound fundamentally shaped the human journey. By modeling the acoustics of very early human shelters and gathering places, scientists can explore theories about the birth of language itself. Did certain acoustic environments, like resonant caves, favor the development of specific vowel sounds or rhythmic patterns? Could the need to communicate effectively in reverberant spaces have driven the complexity of our speech? Furthermore, we can investigate the role of sound in social evolution. Did the ability to orchestrate large-scale, emotionally synchronized ceremonies through acoustic engineering give certain groups a competitive advantage, fostering greater cooperation and more complex social organization? We are beginning to see sound not just as a cultural accessory, but as an active evolutionary force. Perhaps one of the most urgent and beautiful applications of this technology is in the realm of preservation. Many of these ancient sites are under threat from erosion, climate change, and the sheer weight of centuries. The magical acoustic properties they possess are incredibly fragile. The collapse of a single stone or the weathering of a wall can alter them forever. Now we can create a high-fidelity acoustic archive, a digital twin of a site that captures its sonic signature for eternity. This ensures that even if the physical structure is lost, its sound is not. Future generations will still be able to hear the thunderous echo of a Mayan ball court or the whispering gallery of a Greek oracle chamber, experiencing this intangible cultural heritage long into the future. The mysteries that remain are as tantalizing as the discoveries we've already made. As artificial intelligence becomes more integrated into this research, we may be able to analyze vast datasets of acoustic information across hundreds of sites, identifying patterns and design principles that are invisible to the human eye. Could we discover a universal acoustic code, a set of mathematical ratios governing sacred sound that was shared across disparate cultures? Will we be able to fully reconstruct the sound of an ancient ritual, complete with the specific instruments and chants used, and understand its precise neuropsychological impact? The future of archaeoacoustics promises to shatter our silent, static view of history, revealing a vibrant past that was lived in resonance and rhythm, fundamentally changing our understanding of how our ancestors heard their world and, in doing so, built our own. As we bring our exploration to a close, it's clear that these ancient temples were far more than monuments of stone. They were instruments of consciousness, meticulously engineered to play upon the deepest strings of human emotion and belief. We've walked through chambers where a single voice could summon the thunder of the gods, stood in circles where the very stones seemed to whisper secrets, and uncovered the profound intuition that guided our ancestors to harness the invisible force of sound. Their achievements stand as a powerful testament to a form of intelligence that seamlessly wove together the practical and the spiritual, the individual and the collective, creating resonant spaces that shaped the very foundation of civilization itself. This journey reveals that long before the advent of written language or complex machinery, humanity had already mastered one of the most sophisticated technologies of all, the technology of felt experience. The legacy of this ancient acoustic wisdom is not confined to the past. It echoes all around us in the modern world. The next time you feel a sudden sense of awe in a grand cathedral, find yourself deeply moved by a film's powerful score, or feel an inexplicable bond with strangers at a live concert, you are experiencing the very same principles at work. The carefully calculated reverberation in a concert hall, the immersive sound design in a movie theater, and even the calming frequencies used in modern sound therapy are all descendants of that primordial discovery in the dark. That sound can bypass our rational minds and speak directly to our souls. This historical continuum invites us to become more conscious listeners, to appreciate the intentionality behind the soundscapes we inhabit daily, and to consider how we might design our own environments to better support human connection and well-being. This exploration also leaves us with a humbling sense of mystery. How did they achieve such precision with seemingly rudimentary tools? The full extent of their knowledge may be lost to the millennia, but the stones themselves retain their voice, waiting for us to listen and learn. It challenges our modern arrogance, reminding us that technological sophistication is not a linear path, and that deep understanding can be expressed in ways that leave no written manual behind. Theirs was a science of direct sensation and embodied knowledge, a conversation with the physical world that we are only now, with our advanced instruments, beginning to fully decipher. Their work stands as a permanent invitation to remain curious, to look beyond the obvious, and to remember that the greatest mysteries are often hidden in plain sight, or in this case, plain hearing. So the next time you step into a space that seems to hold a special kind of quiet, or where sound behaves in a way that makes you pause, take a moment to truly listen. You might be sensing the faint, enduring echo of an ancient principle, a whisper from our distant past reminding us of sound's profound power to shape our reality. We hope this journey has not only revealed the secrets of prehistoric temples, but has also tuned your ears to the hidden music of the built world. If these echoes of the past have resonated with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next exploration into history's greatest mysteries. Thank you.